Good evening, everybody. We are at the bewitching hour of midnight. Thank you for joining me at such a late time, if you're in the same time zone as me. We've just gone from the Feast of Stephen, 26th of December, to the Feast of John the Evangelist. Now, both of those days in the medieval European tradition are associated with the winter solstice, which, of course, we just had a few days ago on the 22nd, and that's what I'm going to focus on in this session. Now, the Feast of Stephen is associated with the winter solstice in medieval Christianity in relation to Stephen's symbolic association with horses. St. Stephen is the patron saint of horses, and this is an ancient pre-Christian tradition of an association with the horse, with the winter solstice, that came into Christianity. So St. Stephen became this associated figure with horses. Now, John the Evangelist is associated with the winter solstice in Freemasonry. They have John the Baptist as the summer solstice, or around the summer solstice, and John the Evangelist as the winter solstice. Now, as I said, I'm going to focus on the winter solstice in this session. I was going to do more about the golden ratio, but I think I'll carry on with that from the next session in 2 weeks' time. But I just made a labyrinth at the Chalice Well in Glastonbury, so I think I'll talk about that, and we'll draw it as well. So that's what I'm going to begin showing with these slides. All right, so let's begin. Now, here's a very hazy full moon, which I took a photo of just around about 4:30 this afternoon when I was walking in the Oxfordshire countryside, where I am at the moment for this Christmas period. Just breaking through the haze, and again, just when I went to look at the moon about half an hour ago, still the same, just sort of a hazy, beautiful white sphere of light. Now, here is the moon as a crescent. And as you can probably see, this is an image of Glastonbury Tor. For those of you who don't know Glastonbury, I suspect there probably aren't any of you who don't know Glastonbury, but just in case you don't, it's a very important spiritual centre in England, a very important medieval Christian centre. And on the Tor, which is a big hill in Glastonbury, there's the remains of St. Michael's Church. This is St. Michael's Tower on Glastonbury Tor. St. Michael is always associated with the high places, and of course it's St. Michael who is associated with the war in heaven, mentioned in the book of Revelation. So here is the labyrinth that I designed over the last few months and constructed for the winter solstice celebration at the Chalice Well in Glastonbury just a few days ago. Now, if you look up at the top of the image, you can see Glastonbury Tor and St. Michael's Tower that we were just looking at in the previous image as well. Now, looking back at the labyrinth, I'll describe some of the symbolism of this labyrinth. It sort of fits with Chalice Well, as I'll show you, because there is this association of the heart with Glastonbury and with the Chalice Well. And you'll see in the circular area at the top of this labyrinth, there's also, that's another thing I'll mention briefly in these slides. There's quite a nice synchronicity that happened with that paved area and the way in which it fitted into the labyrinth. So let's look at the way that the heart has this association with, well, it's with Glastonbury Tor and therefore also the Chalice Well, which is at the bottom of Glastonbury Tor. Now, Glastonbury is a really ancient place of spiritual significance, but within its Christian association in the medieval world, it was a very significant Christian centre, really one of the most important ones. And there was an association with Joseph of Arimathea. He's part of the myths that are associated with Glastonbury. Joseph of Arimathea is the one who collects Christ's blood from the wound on his side when he's crucified. So that's an image of Joseph there sitting down at the bottom of the cross, collecting Christ's blood. Now, the description of when Christ is pierced by the lance is that both blood and water come out. So you have this association, I suppose you could say, of redness and whiteness in liquid form coming out from the wound of Christ. And so this comes to be associated with Glastonbury Tor, from where you have these two different springs of water, one which is described as red water because it has a lot of iron in it, and one that's more, I suppose, plain water, which is then the white water. Right, sorry, my slides have gone a bit further forward than I was hoping. Right, so here is the quote from the Gospel of John, in which there's this description of blood and water coming out the side of Christ. Now, red and white is very much something you find in alchemy as well, and in various other traditions, in pre-Christian traditions as well. So this isn't just coming from the Christian tradition, but this is the example of some of that symbolism that you find in Christianity. Now, here is an example of the red water, which I just showed a slide of there a second ago. That redness on the stone, obviously the water isn't that red. You can see the water coming out. It looks just like clear water, but it does leave these red iron deposits. And so you end up with this redness wherever the water is. And if you taste the water, you really can taste the iron. And I mean, I was at Glastonbury not long ago with one of my nephews, and he immediately said when he tasted it that he thought it tasted like blood. So it's very interesting that even in the flavour of the water, there is this sense of its bloodness, you could say. Now, as I said, this association from a Christian perspective is that it reflects the water coming out of the wound of Christ. Now, this is an image of the 5 wounds of Christ. This is one of the many you call quincunxial images that you find in Christianity. Quincunx is a depiction of 5 as a square with a center. So the way that 5 is shown on dice, where you have the 4 corners and the center. And this is very much the symbolic dimension of the 5 wounds, that they're the 4 extremities of the body and then the center of the body. So the center and the 4 corners. Now, this is also what you find, say, for instance, with the symbolism of Jerusalem, where Jerusalem is the heart of the world, and then you have the 4 corners of the earth, which are moved out to, you could say, by the 4 Gospels, for instance, the 4 Gospel writers, all emanating forth from the central place in Christianity. So this association of the quincunx of a center moving out to the 4 corners, which is, of course, a universal principle, there are various ways in which it shows itself from a specific Christian perspective. Now, that wound you can see in the heart of Christ is this wound from where the blood and the water come forth from. Now, what we're looking at here is the well cap of the actual well in Chalice Well. The Chalice Well is a garden, beautiful garden, with a well at the top of it. And this is the well cap, which has a very significant geometric form known as a vesica Pisces. So as you can see, it's made up of 2 circles overlapping, and thereby creating a shape which, again, from a Christian angle, is associated with the wound of Christ. And then the line that's going through is then associated with the lance that pierces the side of Christ. Now, there's various other ways of looking at this diagram as well. I'm just giving the specifically Christian symbolism associated with it, but there's all sorts of other dimensions that aren't Christian as well in terms of how it's viewed. Now, it's specifically the red water that goes through the Chalice Well garden. The white water is just over on the other side of the road from the garden. So they do come out right next to each other. And you can collect water from either of these 2 wells when you go to Glastonbury Tor. It's just on the edge of the Tor. Now, the Chalice Well, it does go back a long way into history in terms of descriptions of it. It was used as a spa in the 1700s. It was also used as a seminary for an order of monks who were from the Order of the Sacred Heart. So again, you've got that association of Christ's heart and the piercing of it and the onflow of the blood and the water. But in more recent times, around the sort of earlier part of the 1900s, it was bought by someone called Alice Buckton, who is depicted here. Now, she's a fascinating figure, a poet, a playwright, and a mystic. And she's really, well, she's one of the first people who, I suppose, is associated with Glastonbury in its current, more alternative incarnation. A very significant mystery play that she wrote was called Eager Heart. So this is another one of these associations of the heart that you have with this part of Glastonbury. And she would put on these plays, these mystery plays, and involve as many local people in Glastonbury as possible. So a very interesting figure. You can look her up. There's sort of various things about her. And so we come to the heart in the Chalice Well garden itself. Now, this is up in what's called the Cressfield, which is up beyond the garden, and they only open it for certain events. Now, that paved area, which is in the circle at the top of the labyrinth, that's a stage that was built in the time of Alice Buckton, and she would perform or sort of recite poetry and perform from that stage. So it was very nice that we were able to incorporate it into this heart-shaped labyrinth. Now, if you look closely at that paved area, you can probably see that it has the Vesica Pisces within it in the sense of two overlapping circles. And the line of sand that goes up into the middle of it goes up into the middle of the Vesica. It's orientated in a slightly different way, just towards a very steep slope, which is where people would sit while performances were coming from this particular stage. Now, it got walked in a few days ago on the 22nd. They just had it on the winter solstice itself, which this year in the UK was on the 22nd. And when it gets walked in, it's wonderful. It really, it sort of beds itself in. And then the labyrinth's just left there until it dissolves into the earth. So it's just there for that one day. We did it last year as well. And there's a few years in the past when I've done it with my friend and colleague, Daniel Doherty. So if you're around Glastonbury in the winter solstice, it's worth coming by because I think the labyrinth is something that we're going to be doing in future years as well. Now here is the labyrinth, and this is what we're going to draw. It's easier to draw than you may imagine. There's just a reasonably simple underlying framework, and then we bring in a lot of the lines, not quite all that are in the underlying framework, but I'll describe some of the symbolism that's associated with it. I'm quite interested in the way in which certain body processes express interesting symbolic dimensions. And what we have going on here is, I mean, obviously it's the shape of a heart, but it's supposed to be an image of the actual human heart in the chest. And so it has these four chambers, and I've put the words in there, the right atrium, that's where the blood first enters the heart. Being as this was a winter solstice labyrinth, what I was wanting to emphasize was death and rebirth, which is of course associated with the winter solstice, with that time in the year. And you see the same sort of death and rebirth process happening with the way that the blood interacts with the heart. So what happens with this labyrinth is that the people who walk it are the flow of the blood. So first people enter around the right atrium, which is where the blood enters the heart. Now, when the blood enters the heart in the right atrium, it's almost completely de-oxygenated. So you could say that it's come to the end of its life cycle, because of course the blood is there to take the breath or the spirit around the body. And when it comes back to the heart, it needs to become revived. It needs to receive the spirit or the breath again so that it can take it back around the body. So this four-chambered process that you have with the heart involves this revivification, this return to the spirit, so that the spirit can then be brought around the body. So the blood enters the right atrium and then goes down to the right ventricle, which is that lower part there. Now, if you follow the labyrinth, what you'll see is that once you've gone to the end of the right ventricle, you then go upwards here to this area. Now, this area symbolizes the lungs. Now, the lungs actually really cover the whole of the background of the heart in terms of, if you're talking about the actual physical body. But for the sake of this labyrinth, it works really well to have this higher circle as the place where the spirit re-enters the blood. So as the walkers of the labyrinth walk into that area, there's potential to perhaps to start breathing and to meditate upon the spirit. So then there's a movement out from the lungs and into the left atrium, and then down to the left ventricle, and then finally coming out of the exit down here, and then taking the spirit to the world, as it were, to share with the rest of the world, because this labyrinth is called the heart of the world. So in the way that the heart is then left and the blood goes around the body, in this sense, the heart of the world, the blood comes out and brings the spirit to the world to share with everyone. Now, as I mentioned, the entrance is up at the right atrium. So you'll know where to begin once you've actually drawn this labyrinth. Now, in the original design of the labyrinth, I didn't actually put pathways up in that circle at the top there, but when Helen, my wife, and I, when we sort of walked this out, when we were looking into making it, it felt a bit constrictive having the pathways up there. So we just got rid of all the paths and opened it up for the breath to be breathed. Right, let's draw. I'll switch my screen on. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me at such a late hour. Now I shall spotlight myself for everyone. Okay, so I'm in a different venue again for the Christmas break. Now I'll get my camera on. Okay, let's begin. Let's set up the page so that we can start drawing. Now, first of all, I'm going to put a vertical line down the page. And to get the position of the vertical line, I'm going to measure 8 inches from this edge of the page along to here. And I'm just going to put a little mark like this. So you see a little mark here, that's 8 inches along. And then I'm going to do a similar thing down here. So 8 inches along from here. It's better to be visible now. Right, so 8 inches along to there. So I've got a mark here and a mark here, both 8 inches from the left side of my page. And so I can rely on that as being a vertical line within my page. And I'll draw a line between those 2 points. Now we want to set the compasses at 2.5 inches. So let's do that. Two and a half inches. Now, before we actually draw a circle, I'm going to now give myself the point where the point of the compass is going to go. And that needs to be 7 inches up from the bottom of the page. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm just going to put the compasses straight in. And draw a 2.5 inch circle from there. So there you go, you should have a circle of 5 inch diameter. Right, I'm going to get a horizontal line now. And I'm going to do that just with that usual sort of bisector move. Those of you who are familiar with geometry, I'm going to mark this hemisphere here and this one here. Hopefully that's a bit easier to see on your screen now. Just turn the light down a bit. Now I'm going to then do the equivalent thing like so. And then from here, I'll get my bisector across like so. Now the full moon tonight is at 33 minutes past, so in about just over 10 minutes from now. Once you have those two crosses, put the horizontal line in. Now, I should have said actually, in fact, from now on, perhaps let's stick to this. I'm doing my lines strong enough for you to be able to see them, but I want you to do all of the lines that we're doing for this first part of the pattern faintly. So probably I should have said that a few seconds ago, but have your lines fainter, because what we're going to do is have the underlying structural lines drawn faintly, and then I'll use a heavy pencil to do the actual labyrinth in a much darker line. But I'm obviously having to do mine so they're a bit more visible so you can see them. But on your one, feel free to do them very faintly. Now, as ever, we're working in a mixture of compasses, geometry, and also units of measure. So I've put the 4 on the middle of the circle there, and I've got this ruler underneath that horizontal line. So you should find that the 0 at the beginning of the ruler is just before that bisector cross, and the 8 up here should be just before this bisector cross here. Now we're going to mark little dashes going from 0 and then do 1/2 inch measures. So you should find that when you get to 1.5, that's the circumference of the circle, so you don't need to mark that. And do 2, 2.5. And then once you get to the 4, which obviously is marked because that's the center of the circle, carry on from there. So 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6. 6.5 is the circumference of the circle again. So then 7, 7.5, and finish at 8. So you should have these markings from 0 to 8, all half-inch markings. Now I'm going to set the compasses to quite a small measure. As you can see, I'm going into, I suppose, what you could call the western point of the circle. So that point there on the left, placing the point of the compasses in there. And I'm going to take 1/2 inch. So just 1 unit. I'm going to take that as my compasses measure. And draw a circle like so. Now, like I say, keep all these lines faint. So I'm doing them, a bit more strongly so you can see them. Now, having put that circle there, I'm then going to put the equivalent circle here. Now, these are, I suppose, those center points where you move from an atrium to a ventricle. And they're rather like, I suppose, the two eyes, in the sense of the duality of the eyes that see past and future. Whereas the third eye, which you could say is, I suppose, in the eternal present, is going to be above and between these two eyes. But having said that, don't put the small circle in there. We're only going to have a larger circle there. Right, so having put in these two circles, I'm now going to go back to this center here and open up another unit. So you should now have 1, 2 of those 1/2 inch units on the compasses. Now, once you have that, draw another circle. And again, we want to have these circles, 1 on each side. Now, there is a fascinating thing about the human heart in the sense that even though the heart is really a symbol of unity, it's absolutely essential that there is this duality, this dual aspect of the heart. The heart has the wall that goes through the middle of it, and that's an essential feature once we're born, that we can have the deoxygenated blood on one side and the oxygenated blood on the other. Now, interestingly, when we're actually one with our mother, before we separate from our mother, there are actually holes in that, what's known as the septum. That's the wall dividing the two halves of the heart. So the heart actually needs to be singular when we're one with our mother. But once we become separate from our mother, it's essential that our heart also separates into its two halves, because that's then when the lungs come into action and when we need this oxygenated side and deoxygenated side. But when we're one with our mother, we get our oxygen from her. And so the blood just goes into the heart on the right side, goes through the hole and onto the left side, and then out to the body again. So there's so much interesting symbolism when you look at the human heart, but this dual nature of it is very important, even though the heart is essentially one. Now I'm going to open up one more unit. Again, draw from those two different centers. And perhaps very appropriately, seeing as we're on the third circle, we're also going to go to the third eye, you could say, and put in the same size of circle there. And it looks a little bit like a crop circle at the moment, I have to say. Right, I'm now going to bring my ruler down to the bottom of the page. Now, if you want, you can put that number 4 unit along the middle line as we did up there. The marks that we're actually going to put in here, we're not going to put as many marks as we did up here. We're going to do just a few down here. It's going to be 4 on either side. So I'm going to go, again, 1/2 inch marks. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the same going in this direction. 1, 2, 3, 4. And hopefully you can see these little marks here, but if you can't, just take my word for it. On either side of the vertical line, I've gone 1, 2, 3, 4, and on this side again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1/2 inch marks. Now, as you can see, they're obviously going to be reflecting the 1/2 inch divisions that we have up here, and that's what we're going to use to get, again, more construction lines. So these lines we're going to draw, vertical lines, make sure they're not too strong, because we'll only go over some of them when we draw. So as I said before, I'm going to do them, reasonably strong so that you can see them, but I want you to do them as faintly as possible, really. Because we don't want to have the construction lines being too strong on the final drawing of the labyrinth. I mean, if you are wanting to draw with strong lines here, you can put a piece of tracing paper over when it comes to doing the final labyrinth. So as you can see on both sides, I'm putting in these 4 vertical lines. We'll use sort of different amounts of each one of these lines. All right, we now need a couple more horizontal lines, and these lines are going to be governed by where the line tangents with these smaller circles here. So the first one of these horizontal lines I'm going to do, like I say, tangent the bottom of those two smaller circles, and you can just put it all the way along like that, so that it's sort of starting and ending on the circumferences of those larger circles there, like that. Now, the one up here, as you can see, I'm going to the top of these smaller circles, but I'm only actually going to draw here. This is really the only place we need it. So there's no point in putting more than we need. So just that much there. And like I say, from the top of those two circles there, just tangenting. Right, I very much hope that your compasses can make the stretch that we're about to do now. If they can't, there's not really much that can be done other than perhaps to suggest that if you go through this process using centimeters rather than half-inch units, that might help. Or if you just use half the size of unit. But this is the stretch that we need to get. So from the center of these circles here to the far side of the larger circle here. Now, another option, if your compasses don't quite make this stretch, is to miss out this line that we're about to draw here and draw the next one and all of the next ones after this. And then you could probably just draw this one by eye if you need to. Now, this one is going to go from here all the way down to this middle central vertical, that one that we started off with at the very beginning. Like that. Now, again, these are construction lines, so you don't need to do this really strong, but it's important that you take this line down to the middle vertical axis. Right, once you've done that, turn the compasses around and go to the other center. Now, we're going to do something much the same as what we just did there, except we're not going to go right down to that middle vertical axis. We're going to stop at one vertical before. So like this. Now, this irregularity is to do with the way that the labyrinth works. And it was pointed out, interestingly, by various people asking why there was this irregularity there. And you'll sort of see once we start drawing the final labyrinth, you'll see why it needs to be there, but you'll see how these are, in a sense, equivalent lines. But for the exits to be there, there needs to be this break in this line here, because this is the way out of the labyrinth. Now back to the center on the right again. And I'm going to reduce by one of those half-inch units. Like so. Now this time, when I draw the curve down, I'm going to stop one line shorter than I did the last one. So to here. So stopping there rather than at the middle vertical axis. You'll see a sort of pattern developing here, I suppose an irregular pattern in a sense, but a pattern nonetheless. Because what I'm going to do now is turn the compasses around with the same radial measurement as what we just used, and go down, and again, go to one line before what I did this one. So as you can see, each one that we're doing here, we're gradually moving further and further back. We're receding back, and that's how this part of the labyrinth works. So I've just gone up to here. But I'm going to keep on following this principle, and don't do it with every single one. We're only actually going to draw, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4 of these arcs on each side. So we're now about to do the third one, and then the fourth one will go from the center there. But each time we're going to go back one, we're going to sort of terminate the curve one vertical axis early, as it were. So this one will go to here. Go to here. And then I reduce one more. So as you can see, this takes me to the center of the circle. And it will take me to this line here. Again, one line before where this one finished. And then turn the compasses around and do something similar here. Though this one, of course, will just be finishing there. So each time you've got finish there, then there, and there, then there, and moving back and back each time. Right, now the final thing we need to do, and this will give me an opportunity to talk a bit more about that stuff I've been talking about in previous weeks, in the sense of the reconciling of rational and irrational numbers, because what we're actually working with here, this is essentially a right angle. So, you know, that would be a square fitting inside the circle. Now, the square has a particular measure where you can say that if the edge of the square is 1, then the diagonal is what's called the square root of 2. Now, this is an irrational relationship. You can't express that in whole numbers. But if you have a square and you have the edge as being 70 units, then the diagonal is virtually identical to 99 units. So by having 70 to 99, you have something that's virtually identical to 1 to root 2, but you can actually express it in rational numbers. Now, imagine if the edge of this square was 70 feet, then that would only be about 1/16 of an inch off being 99 feet. So it's as good as. Now, the reason why I'm pointing this out is because if this here is, I suppose, a potential square, then this is divided up into 7 units. You've got 1, 2, 3, and then you'd have 1, 2, 3 here. So the middle unit, that is a sort of that is a unit, but it's going to be very slightly not the right size or not the same size as these units here. And that makes up for this slight discrepancy. Now you'll see quite possibly when you draw the next bit, what I'm going to do, compasses like this. So there should be 1, 2, 3, 4 units. And you may find, you should hopefully find if you're drawing accurately, that this line here, it looks as if it's about to meet this circle, but it doesn't quite, just ever so slightly misses it. And that is that slight discrepancy relating to this not actually being 7 units. I've sort of used it as if it's 7 units, but it's not. It's ever so slightly more than that. It's ever so slightly different to that because of this difference between 1 to root 2 and 70 to 99. But for what we're doing, it should be fine to just by hand, because what we're going to do is make that line follow into that circle there. Now, I'll just give you another minute or two to get to this stage. I'm actually going to draw the final labyrinth by hand with this very strong line pencil. It's going to give a line like that. And there is actually something quite liberating drawing by hand without tools if you have an underlying structure that perhaps has been drawn with tools. So that gives you a sort of grounding and a discipline. And then the free hand can move along the lines. That's the way I'm going to draw now. I'm going to draw by hand. Oh, actually, there's just a few more very small details we need to put in. And this is going to require us to get 1 unit back on the compasses. Now, these are just going to be very small little dashes, which are going to help us find the corner turnings. So with that 1/2 inch unit, I'm going to put the points of the compasses here on the right side of that smaller circle and do just a little dash like that. Now you'll see what we use this for when we start drawing. Now, having gone from there, I'm now going to go to this middle size circle and do a similar thing on the other side, like that. Little dash here. Now, having done those 2 marks, I'm going to go to the other side and do something a little similar here. And I'll go on the left side of that smaller circle and do a dash, like so. A bit too much of a dash there. One like that, and then a similar one here. So I was in a bit too much of a dash to draw that dash. Right, I'm now going to start drawing the labyrinth. So when you're ready, just follow what I do. Oh, actually, sorry, one more thing. I know it's the second time I've said that now. Literally one more thing, and that'll be it. Right, so you see these lines here. So first line, the one that's furthest to the left, I'm going to go one line in, and I'm going to go up through that first largest curve and go to the second curve here. Now I'm going to line up my ruler between there, and let me give you the other point that we need to go from. That's going to be here. So as you can see, from the center of that circle, along there and down there. Now all we need to do is draw a line like so. And that's going to be a final line. So I'll just describe that again. So as you can see, second line in like that, goes through the first curve and goes to the second curve. That's where you're going to line your ruler up to. And then the line here from the center of the circle, go to the right and then down one. Do that and just draw the line within those circles. Right, here we go. Right, now watch out with this line here. Make sure that you don't go all the way up to the middle vertical axis, because this is a very important point here. This is the way we go through to the lungs. So don't block that off, whatever you do. Now you can see that little dash that we did, the first one of those little dashes, that's where I began drawing from. So we're going to do something sort of similar when we do the next one. So from this dash, I'm actually going to go around to that dash. Now my line that I drew here, I drew it quite strong, so I'm actually going to just make that die down a bit. But this here is the entrance. Right, let's do this side as well. So beginning from the dash and just going around to where it meets the curve. Now this one here is going to be slightly different in what it does, in the sense that it's going to do that. 2 units there. And this one, beginning from the center of this circle, is going to be 5 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one will actually go all the way up to the vertical axis. Oh goodness, let's give ourselves a spine. Let's give ourselves that middle axis. So it's going to be a long straight line, everyone. Watch out. It will inevitably have a bit of a wobble because it's freehand. We're only human. Let's keep going with the straight lines. So this one. This one will obviously stop a bit before. Now beware, this next vertical line is going to begin from a little bit further down. It's actually beginning from that horizontal line that we put in a little bit earlier. Whereas the next one goes back up again, 1 unit higher to here. Now curved lines. This is the first one, meeting the line that we just finished drawing. Whereas this one goes all the way from that circle. Now this next line, again, we drop down 1 unit. And this is the longest curve in the whole labyrinth. So that's the whole of that side of the labyrinth done. Right atrium, right ventricle. Now I'm going to start working on this side, and I'm going to drop down 1 unit and begin from here. And then this next one will go back up that 1 unit. And then back down a unit again. Always stopping where it meets the curve, obviously. And the final one is here. Now, because of this irregularity, where you have, this one to this, to this, to this, to this, and so on, you end up with this little piece of no man's land when you start doing the curves on this side. So I'm going to put in this curve here, but also this. And so you end up with this little piece of no man's land, which isn't walked in. Yeah, I could have made it a dead end, I suppose, but really unicursal labyrinths are far more spiritually and psychologically healthy, because you're given the pathway, you're given the golden thread that takes you through the labyrinth. You don't get lost in it. So I thought it would just be a piece of no man's land. Dropping down one at this point, dropping down 1 unit. Yeah. And then finally, to finish off, these curved bits that come up into the lung area at the top, we want to put in one beginning from here. And as I say, I'm just going to lead it straight into the circle, even though there's that very tiny discrepancy. So that one begins from there, whereas the one on this side begins from further down. And from here, you can draw your circle of spirits. Spirits and breath, they are the same words. Now, something that I have done on my own diagram is to take a 1/4 of an inch on my compasses and just put a very small circle in the middle. So this just has a 1/4 inch radius. Hey everyone, my half an hour sessions seem to be getting longer and longer each time. This one's been about an hour and 10 minutes. It's 1:10 if you're in my time zone. So I think I'd probably better put my camera back on and say hello and goodbye. Thanks for joining me with this. I really enjoyed doing that. So do feel free to walk this labyrinth when you have the chance. Yeah, has anyone got anything they want to say? I mean, it's a bit late at night, but if anyone wants to ask anything or say anything, feel free. I'll put you on actually.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. It's
Great.
amazing.
Yeah, well, I've got to turn my volume up. I can't hear what anyone's saying. Hang on a sec. That's better, yeah. Right, well, I hope you've enjoyed that. And join me again in 2 weeks' time. I think it'll be back to the golden ratio then and Fibonacci numbers. Not sure what we're going to do yet. I just generally decide a few days before. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one, and it'll go onto YouTube soon. So pass it on and draw it again if you want to, and see you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks for coming.
It's been fun to have something in the afternoon. I don't think I've ever had an afternoon class.
Afternoon class. Oh goodness,
Afternoon.
you're obviously much further west than here.
Yeah, I'm usually the one that's waking up very, very early. So this is
Oh
this
right,
is
of
a rare
course.
treat.
Oh right, okay.
And on
Right.
the
Well,
west
thanks for
coast of the
coming.
US.
You've all been welcome wherever you're coming in from, and I shall see you next time.
Thank you,
See
Tom.
you again. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tom.
Bye.
Thank you.
Noel.
Mm.